And there you have it, a searing day of testimony, of damning personal evidence being brought forward against the FBI, against the entire United States gymnastics structure, and also really against the government and society itself by some of the great athletes, women athletes on the USA Women's Gymnastics team, who were among the hundreds of people, hundreds of young women, girls, many of them, sexually abused in the most grotesque of manners by Larry Nassar, who for 18 years was the team doctor for USA Gymnastics. And you could feel the fury in these young women's statements here at the press conference, and their emotion and pain and rage in their testimony before Congress. It are a few days of congressional testimony that I can remember that are as searing and damning of so many institutions, from USA Gymnastics to the FBI, to broader issues of equality in the society at large. And to help us break this all down, our ABC News contributor and former FBI agent, Brad Garrett, who is with us, ABC News legal contributor Terry Austin, and USA Today columnist Christine Brennan. Thank you very much for being with us. And Christine, let me go to you. You've covered this for a long time. And I just want to ask you about the basic question that I have listening to this today. Why didn't people, the FBI agent who took the incredible, awful story from McKayla Maroney, why didn't officials of USA Gymnastics, young girls saying they'd been touched in these horrible ways, what possible reason did they have for not pushing forward their allegations, for not doing something? What have you been able to figure out about that?
Terry, you're right. I've covered this story from the get-go. I still can't really figure it out. How can human beings, no matter how blinded by gold medals or wanting sponsors to be happy or whatever it might be, who cares about that? These are human beings. These are young women. They're being sexually abused by the team doctor, hundreds of them. Obviously, they first heard Steve Penny, who was then the CEO of USA Gymnastics. The FBI, as we've heard, of course, today, first heard about one or two. Well, one is enough. I mean, you don't have to have hundreds. Yeah, we ended up with hundreds, but one or two, one is enough. And they did not do it. So I'll try to give you an answer. The best answer I can give you is that they were so caught up in the culture of winning gold medals. Keep in mind, this is USA Gymnastics. This is a sport that wins lots of medals. They had a great Olympics in 2012 in London. They had a great Olympics in Rio in 2016. They want to keep it moving. I'm not obviously saying this is right. I'm just trying to explain the mindset of the inexplicable. But still, they wanted to keep it going. They didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to cause any trouble. The athletes also, many of them, obviously very young women, didn't necessarily have the power to speak out, the power that we're seeing today from these American heroes, because they knew if they spoke out, they'd be labeled troublemakers, pulled out of line, and bring another person in, and there goes your Olympic dream right out the window if you speak out. So it was a perfect storm, or an imperfect storm, of horribleness everywhere, lack of leadership, but blinded by this love of success and medals and lack of caring for people, and just a sense that they could get away with anything. They were all powerful. They had no one looking over their shoulder. But again, it boggles my mind that I'm even saying these words, Terry, because it's just so despicable what they did.
It really is, but that does give us at least some insight into the culture. So, Brad, they go to the FBI. The FBI gets involved, and the FBI isn't winning gold medals. And as Christine just said, all the gold medals in the world aren't worth the preciousness of one young life. So the FBI called in to protect them, and this colossal, catastrophic failure. What happened? I mean, anyone who heard these stories, if you're the investigator and you hear this story, how do you walk away from it? How do you deep six it? What happened in the FBI, do you think?
It's just unbelievable. I mean, I'm trying to put myself into that agent's situation, and what I would have done with that information immediately after an initial interview about who to get involved, and get the ball rolling toward Dr. Nassar to put everybody on notice. There's something wrong here. Yes, he has his day in court, but you got to get this stopped on the front end. So the point being, you apparently have an agent here who just doesn't care, who's probably lazy, who doesn't see that a violation is occurring in Indiana, it's occurring in Michigan. He may also go to, well, is this really a federal violation? And of course the answer, Terry, is who cares about any of those statements? What's important is when you get information, and I've gotten information over the years that had nothing to do with the FBI, it didn't matter. It's important information, and someone has come to law enforcement, particularly somebody who's young and impressionable and vulnerable and has been assaulted, that you have the duty to immediately do something with that. And then the whole idea that the special agent in charge then has his own sort of reality of what this is all about. And maybe he just listened to the supervisor. I have no idea. But there is no legs to stand on here. I mean, an agent right out of Quantico would have done something with this immediately, and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And Terry Austin, this wasn't just about the failure to bring Nassar to justice in a timely manner for the abuse that had already been reported. But as we heard in the testimony, the IG report found 70 more victims were abused by Nassar as a result of their failure to act in a timely manner. So what does accountability look like here? What do you think the prospects are of seeing officials from the FBI prosecuted for this?
Well, I think the prospects of prosecution are going to be difficult at best, only because they talked about the fact that the statute 18 U.S.C. 208 may not apply. That prohibits executive branch employees from participating in a government matter and getting a financial interest. Here, I guess applying for a job doesn't equate to, violating that particular statute. So we might not see any criminal responsibility here. But we heard them talk about the DOJ should have come today, the fact that the DOJ should have been involved. And I think what we will see, Diane, I think we will see that the FBI, which falls under the DOJ, is going to make sure that they carry out all four of what the Inspector General's report said to do, which is contact and coordinate, make sure that it's not just that single point of contact, make sure they get the required approvals, make sure that they have techniques where they can interview children, young people, and do it correctly. And then finally, to make sure that they train in all of these areas. So I do think we will see that accountability as far as the FBI is concerned. But as far as the individual agents, right now, it doesn't sound like they will be criminally pursued, but that could change.
And Terry, what about the USA Gymnastics and the USA Olympic Committee, which the gymnasts are implying or are outright alleging was complicit, both organizations, in either covering up these years of abuse or at the very least turning a blind eye to it?
Well, that's right. We heard Raisman talking about the fact that 3 organizations, USA Olympics, USA Gymnastics, and FBI, should be investigated to see what else could be done. And I think as far as the gymnastics and Olympics organizations are concerned, we might see more people once the investigation is concluded, once the Senate does what they need to do, talk to the people they need to talk to. We may actually see people who could get fired under the policies of those organizations and be held accountable, particularly, obviously, if there was anything criminal involved. But hopefully they'll uncover all of what was going on and make changes in those organizations as well, because that's important. That's where it started.
And Brad, if I could ask a kind of a big picture question here as well. We're relearning a lesson in this country that we just have to learn all the time, it seems, which is that who gets the attention and the dedication of law enforcement in many ways is an expression of status and power. And I wonder, do you think, well, these women were on their way, young women were on their way to the Olympics in many ways, so it's not like they were marginal people, but they were young girls. Is there anything about that might be deep-seated unconscious in the FBI and other law enforcement agencies that some people count more than others when it comes to investigations?
Well, maybe. I think it's certainly been my experience in almost 40 years of doing some version of this that I never really thought about that. but maybe it does in some people's minds. I still think, Terry, that as far as the agents in Indianapolis, the two in question, this is all just driven by being lazy and sort of it's self-serving. I'm not going to really deal with this. I'm going to pass the ball. I don't know that it goes to that they didn't believe them, other than they just didn't care because it wasn't in their backyard. And that's not obviously even a remotely adequate answer. But it's, and you know, how many times can we repeat this? Is it's like, I've just never heard anything like this. I mean, I've worked with agents who aren't very motivated and they're lazy, but even they would have done something with this that wasn't even remotely done. But it's, you know, it's, to your point, Terry, cases where that have a high profile, and let's face it, U.S. Olympics gymnasts have a fairly high profile. I mean, you would have thought in this case the opposite would have happened if, in fact, you had some sort of bias about whether a person had status or notoriety or well-known. The key here is you didn't do anything with it, period. And that's just, it goes beyond criminal prosecutions, civil action that may occur perhaps in this case. It's just morally awful.
It is a matter of character, and let me go back to Terry on this question of the role of the Department of Justice. You mentioned, as did many of the senators, that people were surprised there was no representative from Department of Justice, which oversees the FBI and ultimately is, you know, is the department which would be in charge of righting the wrongs here. And you could hear it in the statements of the young women today in their press conference. They resented that. How did that happen? It just seems like we're compounding these insults and mistakes in this case.
I don't know how that happened, Terry. It's an excellent point. It would have been an easy fix by the DOJ. I think their thinking is that they already sent the FBI. This is a representative of the DOJ, and they're looking at it in that way. But it would have been simple to send someone to answer the questions. Not only did the women who testified think that this was a slight, but the senators thought so as well. So I think you're right. They should have just shown up and answered questions, and they would not be criticized.
All right.
A lot of allegations here that go beyond just lack of training.
Well, that's right. I agree with that.
Brad, sorry, I don't know if my mic was on for that full question, but I wanted to ask again what the FBI can do here, because there was a lot of talk today about things like additional training, but the allegations today go beyond what results from a lack of training.
Well, that's right.
This isn't about training.
Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Okay, this isn't about training, Diane. This is about just doing your job. You don't have to know anything about working a child abuse case or interviewing children. It's just none of that matters. It's important, it's helpful, but this is about reporting a crime. And you take it down, and if you don't even feel like you could adequately interview one of these gymnasts, then at the very least, get somebody on the phone with you or ideally in person to help you do this interview. Maybe let them run the interview with you intervening occasionally. I mean, this is not that difficult to do. You know, you have to get up and go do it. But the training here, I will tell you that every FBI agent is trained at Quantico in the behavioral block that people who sexually abuse kids are repetitive. If you don't stop them, they're going to keep doing it because it's a compulsion, it's a desire, it's something they want to do. Nassar is a poster child of that, and so are a lot of cases I've worked. You've got to stop people immediately, and so people know that. And that's the part of this case that absolutely makes no sense and also makes it so egregious.
And Terry Austin, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to add that I think part of what was going on is that there was a conspiracy of sorts, not maybe technically under a legal definition, but the Olympics and the gymnastics were working with the FBI and trying to say, look, this is nothing. Look over here. Don't look over there. Make sure nothing happens, because basically I think the perception was we do want these gold medals. And, you know, to our point earlier, obviously that's not good enough. But I think that working together, that's how we got to this point. There's a culture where sexual abuse isn't looked at as seriously, or certainly wasn't before Me Too and Time's Up and what we've seen in courts now today. But I think in 2015, when this first started to begin, people were putting it under the rug. And because these girls were so profitable for the United States, everyone was willing to look the other way, sadly.
And Brad, I'm gonna put you in charge of the FBI for a moment, like Christopher Wray. First, how much damage has the FBI suffered here in these revelations, and how would you go forward to ensure? Is there anything institutional that can be done? As you say, this is so far beyond the bounds of training, it's just basic character. Is there anything institutional that the FBI can do to make sure it never happens again?
So, Terry, in every field office, large ones like New York, Los Angeles, etc., have maybe an assistant director in charge. He or she obviously cannot keep track of even every of the hundreds of cases, if not thousands, in their division. But they all have assistant agents in charge. They have supervisors. They may have inspectors. There needs to be some sort of daily check of what came in and what went out. And this is a great example of, okay, you got a lazy agent, didn't want to do his job, didn't write a report for 17 months. But if that would have gone into a daily checklist or a daily tickler, somebody above him would have caught that and got him moving, or put somebody else in it that could get them moving. That's an internal thing. That doesn't help you much with the public, because these things carry so much long-term damage. Terry, how many conversations have you and I and Diane have had about police shootings, about the Chauvin George Floyd case? Those things cause so much damage to law enforcement, to the good cops that want to work every day and do their job, and then this happens and it sets them back. And that's what the FBI has with this. They're just going to have to eat this for a while, and through diligence, hard work, etc., they'll eventually start to win parts of the public back. Some they may not get back at all. But to Christopher Wray's point, you're only as good as the people that will come and report to you. And this type of behavior will cause people not to do that.
So, Terry Austin, what happens next? Where do we go from here, both with the FBI and with the other organizations involved in this?
I think what the Senate is going to do at this point is they are going to try to get more information from the DOJ. They asked Christopher Wray, frankly, to go back and see if he could get some more information and compel the DOJ to essentially respond. And I think you heard Christopher Wray there say, well, there's only so much I can do. But I think that's one of the first steps, is to try to see what the DOJ's position is here. And I think they're going to continue to investigate both the USA Olympics, the USA Gymnastics, and FBI to make sure that this doesn't happen again. They are going to do more than just talk. And you heard the women there saying, we don't want just talk. They seem to trust what the Senate Judiciary Committee is doing, because there has been legislation that has been passed. They are investigating this, and they are taking it very seriously. And I think the accountability, Diane, I'll end with that piece, is very important, the individual accountability. If they can, in fact, get these two FBI agents, who one retired and the other one was just fired 2 weeks ago, I think if there can be some responsibility, some accountability, some liability as far as they are concerned, I think the Senate Judiciary Committee will think they have, in fact, done their job.
All right, Brad Garrett, Terry Austin, we appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you missed the top of the hearing, or if you've have not been able to pay attention all day, it is Worth hearing these gymnasts again in their own words about what they went through. We'll be right back.
Over the course of my gymnastics career, I have won 25 World Championship medals and 7 Olympic medals for Team USA. That record means so much to me, and I am proud of my representation of this nation through gymnastics. I am also a survivor of sexual abuse, and I believe without a doubt that the circumstances that led to my abuse and allowed it to continue are directly the result of the fact that the organizations created by Congress to oversee and protect me as an athlete, USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee failed to do their jobs.
After telling my entire story of abuse to the FBI in the summer of 2015, not only did the FBI not report my abuse, but when they eventually documented my report 17 months later, they made entirely false claims about what I said. Let's be honest. By not taking immediate action from my report, they allowed a child molester to go free for more than a year. And this inaction directly allowed Nassar's abuse to continue. What is the point of reporting abuse if our own FBI agents are going to take it upon themselves to bury that report in a drawer?
I reported my abuse to USA Gymnastics over 6 years ago, and still, my family and I received few answers and have even more questions about how this was allowed to occur and why dozens of other little girls and women at Michigan State had to be abused after I reported. In sacrificing my childhood for the chance to compete for the United States, I am haunted by the fact that even after I reported my abuse, so many women and girls had to suffer at the hands of Larry Nassar.
Over the past few years, it has become painfully clear how a survivor's healing is affected by the handling of their abuse. And it disgusts me that we are still fighting for the most basic answers and accountability over 6 years later. In 2015, it was known that at least 6 national team athletes had been abused by Nassar. There was even one of the athletes that was abused on film. Given our abuser's unfettered access to children, stopping him should have been a priority.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.